Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Read what you see first for me.
The environment of the story.
Okay, good. Now, let's set the ball rolling. Let's read the text quickly. Exodus chapter 1, verses 7 to 14. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made themselves was with rigor. Amen.
Amen.
Wow. First, does anybody have any concerns, any contribution, any revelation into this test? I'll give you the chance before I start talking. I hold the mic for a long time. Anybody? Dr. Boyson.
Well, I think we've looked at it briefly sometime. Well, I don't know whether we've done this sometime in the past, but anyway, it's always good to go back and study anyway. But this story depicts master slave relationships. Like I see it as
Your voice, can you amplify your voice a bit? Dr. Boyson.
Yeah, I'm trying to take off my Bluetooth.
Okay. Cynthia, do you have any ideas?
No, sir.
Auntie
Not
Q,
now.
any ideas? Okay. Yes. We dealt with this test about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But I decided to bring it back. This time we are going to look at it from different angles. And I chose it simply because of the times we live in.
Yeah.
These contemporary times, especially in America, right? We want to understand America, we want to understand the world, and we want to understand why this is happening. And we'll realize that, in fact, this is not the first time it has happened. In fact, it happens often. And so the good student will come to understand some patterns in life. And as a result, our understanding of how life works will be enhanced. And hopefully we could use that enhancement and that knowledge for something positive, something great. Amen. So that's a tall goal. But let's set the ball rolling. If you look on the screen, I've put some things there, right? I've put the environment of the story, right? And Israel, I said, the first point that sticks out is Israel is fruitful. And we can get that from verse 7. Exodus 1:7. It goes like, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Right? So that point, Israel was fruitful, captures the environment as it was. Right? Do we agree?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the second thing, I said there was political transition. How do we know? Verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Relax, just set aside knew not Joseph for a minute, but concentrate on the fact that there had been a political transition, right? Now, I'll give you a little bit history. It is believed that at this time, right, it was a native Egyptian dynasty that had taken over. Prior to that, there was a dynasty called the Hyksos, right? The Hyksos. They were more of Greek, right? But they constituted a dynasty, and they ruled Israel for quite some time. They ruled Egypt for quite some time. And so at this point, the native Egyptian dynasty now took over the political affairs of Egypt at this time. Now, why is this important? We will realize that the author clues us on one fact, that this particular native Egyptian king did not know Joseph. And the question becomes, why knowing Joseph would be such a great thing? Well, we know that Egypt was saved from a certain catastrophe which affected almost every part of the world. And it was because of the wisdom of Joseph, who was a Jew, right? Or a child of Israel. So for a native king, a new king to arise, and the author tells us that this king did not know Joseph. That is quite a statement. So
we're looking about how many? About 100 years after Joseph died?
Yeah, possibly, because this will be roughly around the 400 years, the 400 year of the Israelites in Egypt. They were in Egypt for 430. So this was about 400 years, which means Joseph had died close to 300 years earlier. Right? And so when you read the text, you realize, if you read from verse 1 and you actually come down, you come down to verse 5, you realize that in total, the number of Egyptians, of Israelites that came in addition to Joseph was 72 people, right? But by this time, roughly 300 years later, right, we realize that Egypt was filled with them. So they definitely were more than 72. They had grown. And if you look at the facts given in verse 7, it's like prosperity had visited them. Numbers now was, was an advantage, right? Oh, now a new king arises, and then something else changes. Joseph no longer a factor. So you have ignorance, whether deliberate ignorance or true ignorance, we don't know. But for a king to not know Joseph was quite troubling, right? Because Egypt was known to be a center, I mean, a world power at this time. So learning, recording of events, right? History, Egypt's history would be something that will be known at least to the one who was going to be the overlord of the land, right? But the author tells us that this guy did not know Joseph. And because of that, Joseph's descendants didn't hold any special place. So we know political transition. Now, in verse 9, the author tells us, now this is the king talking. He said, verse 8, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. What an admission, what a statement, right? Now, for us to know one or two things about truth or data and how the stature of data is enhanced by the career or the messenger of that data, right? I'm going to introduce you to the three things we deal with in what we call rhetorics, right? In rhetorics, which deals with the believability of a message, right? We have three kinds. We have what we call pathos. Pathos is where a message is believed because of the emotional content of the message, right? Hey, come to Choboy! Hey, I mean, people shout, you get caught, or people, you go to Jamestown, where I come from, right? Ashijama, before you realize you are caught in that, whatever, right? So a message's believability, if it is based on the emotional content of it, a lot of preachers actually use pathos. They can rouse up the congregation with sorrowful songs or chants and praise and what have you, right? Pathos. Now, the second principle is what we call logic or logos or logic, where the believability of the message depends on the truth and validity and the intellectual content of the message, right? So you don't need pathos, you don't need anything. If anybody reads that piece of data, that person can see a lot of thinking in that data, right? So the data's value is based on the intellectual content of it. We call it logos, out of which we get logic. Now, the final one that I want to dwell on is what we call ethos. Ethos is where the believability of the message depends on the credibility or the reputation or the standing of the messenger. Are we getting the picture clear? The three principles of rhetoric. Why is this important? Who is the person making the statement in verse 8 and 9, right? The Bible makes us to understand that this person was the king. Do we get the picture? Hi?
Okay.
Do we get the picture? The person talking was the king. And one would appreciate the fact that a king will normally not get up to say just about anything, Trump being the only exception that I know of.
Hey, hail the king.
Right?
Behold your king.
Yes.
Could you please repeat the statement you just made?
Okay.
Verse 9.
Okay. In
Are you
verse 8
saying
and
that
verse
is
9,
the king?
it was the king
Are you
talking.
that is? Are you sure?
Yeah. Let's read verse 8 and 9.
It's
Look at it. Verse 8
like
says, Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, that's the king. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
like somebody you
Cynthia,
time around. Yes, I'm here.
do you agree that it was here, it is the king talking in verse 9?
No, sit well with me because it sounds like saying this who is for
Yeah. Cynthia, your voice is also going in and coming out.
do that for me. What I'm saying is that it's like a speech, but saying that at this time, year around arose, who doesn't know Joseph? It doesn't sound like the king himself saying something. I think if it's the king that
No.
is
In
saying, the
verse
king
now,
would have
read
said,
verse 9. Verse 9, read verse 9. Right? Verse 9, it is the king who has been mentioned in verse 8, talking in verse 9. And we are concentrating, our focus is on verse 9 now, because that's where the issue is.
yes, but where the issue is, I think if it's in my opinion, I think if it's the king himself talking, it should have read like, and I said to my people.
No. The
Look,
reason is it isn't the king writing, right? It is an author writing, but using dialogue in verse 8 and verse 9, right? So when an author wants you to meet a character without the author's influence, he uses dialogue, right? So in verse 9, we see a character talking, and that character is the king who has been mentioned in verse 8. Not the author, right? Are you getting the picture?
so we were looking at an author,
Author now using dialogue.
a dialogue.
Yes. In verse 9, that's why that king said unto his people. Is that making sense?
Okay.
Okay. Now, he said unto his people, and then pause. His people, which people? Now look at the controversy, right? He said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. So,
how is that even possible?
but wait a minute. Two people are introduced here. The people of the king and then the people of the children of Israel. Are you understanding?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't, I mean, make sure you catch these little nuances. He spoke to his people. Meanwhile, he was the king of Egypt. In fact, the author says, a new king over Egypt. So this was the king of all Egypt, and Israel was in Egypt at this time. But did that king see himself as the king over the people of the children of Israel? When he said, the author makes us to say he spoke to his people. which is creates a certain picture, right? And so if you look at the point, it was as if there was some sort of political, tension, suspicion here and there, right? Societal difference.
He created a clear distinction.
Yes,
Yes,
that's exactly what
he
it is.
created a clear distinction.
Right?
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, why do we see parallels in America?
Yeah, the same thing. The same thing.
So you begin to start understanding the world as it is. The statement we've always made, the stories of the Bible are not about what happened, but about what happens. Are you getting me? This was over 4,000 years ago. This happened. In fact, this happened, they believe, in 1500 BC. Right? 1500 BC. So you are looking at least 3,000, 2,000 plus 2,000 years since Christ left, right? Plus 1,500 before Christ arrived. So 3,500 years ago, what we are experiencing now actually happened. It's okay.
It's still repeating itself.
So we have to now take the Bible serious. What was happening there? We are witnessing the same thing. Here is the king of the whole of Egypt, now segmenting the population into his people and the people of the children of Israel. Question: when he spoke, where were the reps of the children of Israel? Right? Were they present? Did any Israelite make it to the table? Did any Israelite?
I think it was like talking to his Republican white people, and the Israelites and the Democrats were not available.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing when a president only talks to his people? The people, quote unquote, not the whole of America.
I think this one definitely, when you are a king, you have people within your circles, your immediate people. It's like a cabinet.
Okay.
Okay, so definitely NDC in power will not bring MPP people into his cabinet. For what reason?
So you see the mistake we make. But don't forget, this was his people.
I don't think
not his advisors.
I don't think it's a mistake, because when you look at this, we just said that this thing has happened over 4,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Perhaps from Genesis up to Exodus, with these children of Israel into Egypt, can be said it was also God's plan.
No, of course, everything is God's plan, but we are trying to look at
God's plan. So when you look at politics now and looking at this thing that happened 400,000 years ago, or so whatever years ago, these things still happen in every political environment.
Nobody is disputing.
Definitely.
But is it right? Does that make it right?
Yes, it makes it. It's supposed to happen that way.
No. The fact that something happens doesn't necessarily make it right.
So after 4,000 years, we couldn't correct it, and we are still making them.
Listen, we have a saying in history, and we say it this way: we learn from history that we don't learn from history.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
a
so yeah,
human problem.
we learn from history. That is why we are still having people people in their cabinet, and it's one-sided, and that's it.
Well,
Because
I agree to what you are saying. I agree with you. However,
yes,
this test, when the Bible said he spoke to his people, this was more like a town hall meeting, not a cabinet
it
meeting.
wasn't.
No, to us. When you
It
read the
wasn't
whole
a
thing,
cabinet meeting.
in fact, let's go step by step. You realize that something interesting was happening.
You see, if we perhaps it said, and he said these people
Mhm.
very specific,
So
very definite.
who were his people?
Yes,
Is it
the
only the
people in his
Egyptians?
schools and his
Uh,
cabinet.
No.
Not
My point is
yes.
when the author could have said the author used tax masters here, right? When the need for specificity was required. When he said his people, and then he
Okay.
goes on to also mention the people of the children of Israel, you know what the author is trying to put across. So you look at everything together, right? He spoke to his people, and then he
Okay.
referenced the people of the children of Israel. Would you say the people of the children of Israel will be also their own cabinet? No, I was talking about people in general.
No.
You getting me? So you take one thing, you look at what is happening the next, and then it gives you some perspective. But the point we are trying to understand, right, is, and what we have to learn to understand the dynamics of life, how the world works, which that's what one of our goals, right, is the fact that this is a king for the whole of Egypt, which is to say, once you were in Egypt, he was your king. It doesn't matter the ethnic groupings, right? It doesn't matter. Everybody, as long as you were within a political boundary, the ruler or the leader of the place was your leader or ruler, whether you liked it or not, right? So here was the king, and the author has been generous, very charitable to tell us a new king arose over Egypt. So you are talking of the political land space of Egypt, not ethnic groups or communities, but the totality of Egypt. He was the king. And then the author now tells us he speaks to his people. If he spoke to his people, everybody within that political space will be his people. But no, the author now is giving us some distinctions. That he spoke to his people and he referenced the people of the children of Israel. And the reason this is important, these are tricks of writing. The author could have written, oh, the children of Israel, right? But when he introduces people of the children of Israel, he wants you to pay attention. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Right? And I'll give you some clues, right? I'll give you some clues. Some words, they play certain roles in sentence. The word behold, when you see it in the text, the author is saying, pay attention to what is to follow. Are you getting the tricks of writing? Right? In biblical writing, these are cue words. They are cues. When you see them, the author is trying to alert you that something that may be controversial or something that you need to be aware of is about to be said. So the author introduces behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. This is the king talking. So you know that his words carry more weight than the average person. Do we agree? And that's why I took the trouble to give you the three rhetorical devices: the pathos, the ethos, and the logos, right? When a message is believed, or the believability of a message depends on the carrier or the messenger of the message, we call it ethos, out of which we get the word ethical, right? So this king, the ruler of the land, saying this, actually distinguishing between the natives of the land and then only residents of the land. Some people are just residents, they are not natives. The natives are both natives and residents. Are you getting the distinction? Right?
So at this time, can we infer that the Israelites, did they have green card citizenship, or they were just strangers?
It's like birthright citizenship. They were born there. Because don't forget, the author made us to understand in verse 6, and Joseph died, and all his brethren and all their generation, they all died. So these people that we are encountering now were all born in Egypt.
Oh, okay.
Are you getting the picture clear?
Then the king was really a bad historian. He didn't learn nothing about the history of Egypt and how Joseph ruled the country.
In fact, isn't it amazing that the verse 7 will, verse 8 will open with a new king arose over Egypt, and he did not know Joseph, which is a nice way, or what we call an euphemistic way of saying he was profoundly ignorant. Let's come to America. What, in terms of intellectual ability, what defines the current president? His own generals, his own chief of staff said this guy doesn't read. He doesn't like reading.
Where we are hearing into
this one,
I think that will be a very big fish for us to fry, because
No, all I'm saying is we are trying to understand our contemporary world, right? By understanding something that happens frequently in nature. And so we are looking at one account where a similar thing happened. And so we are looking at the parallels, right? So that we will not be surprised. Whether this king's lack of knowledge was feigned or true, we don't know. Whether Trump's apparent lack of interest in matters of the intellect is true or false, we don't know. But we know one thing: the guy doesn't like reading.
Let me come in a bit. When we look at this that we are addressing now, they said the new king didn't know Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
How? You know Egypt be and everything, not everything, almost everything was okay. Could it be that they couldn't go back into
is breaking.
Cynthia, maybe change your position, move to an area where your signal is more powerful.
Okay. Let's see.
I mean, this thing could be
Let
that
me
either the guy didn't read to know, or he has some little knowledge, but he just wanted to ignore the people and just be wicked like we have in our system here.
Okay, but that actually lends more credence to what we are saying. That there
Yeah, I
are
mean,
parallels.
Yes,
you can know and just fake that you don't
I'm
know,
not
so you can victimize.
saying I'm not saying I don't know how we will measure the intelligence or the IQ of a person for us to say he doesn't. We know this guy to be um a business tycoon. Okay, so I'm sure he knows history. He knows something.
Okay,
I'm pretty
okay,
sure he's that stupid. He knows what he's doing.
okay,
So if we are saying in Egypt, we know about Joseph. That means maybe Joseph died, and after 2,000 years, 3,000 before, because today, because of the power of internet and history, of course, we can go into it. America over 250 years ago, we can dig and get basic things, how they came here, how everything started. So is it is the age difference, years that passed by, that this guy, the current king of Egypt?
I mean, we can, like you are saying, we can give him credit that
okay.
it was a long time ago,
No,
but
Dr.
also the
Wesley,
fact that
I'm not
the
going
fact
to give this man any credit. There is something there that we need to really look at. Look at something. Egypt was known as a place of civilization.
Mhm.
In fact, the art and science of writing hieroglyphics, right, was known to Egypt. So how could anybody say that a king, not an ordinary person, a king, right? And so again, there are things, but I don't want to belabor the point because there are more important meat we need to digest in this, right?
I don't know whether in
So
those days they had photographers, but at least there should be some symbol to depict all the leaders of Egypt or the one that has served significantly. There is no way you can mention the history of Egypt without mentioning Joseph. You
yes,
would have
so
to
if
know.
a king arose and he didn't know, either he was faking that ignorance or that person just didn't read or didn't like reading. And we have a parallel
Yeah, because
here.
you definitely have to know the history of these Egyptians. And when you find out the history of the Egyptians, definitely the name that will come up with their ancestor Joseph who brought them there. So it's true. We can't give him any cuts or anything. I mean,
Yeah. No, no. I won't cut him some slack. No, no. Right? So let's move on. My point is this. We are trying to look at the environment, right, within which this story played out. To make sense of that environment, the characters, the players, the actors, right? They will look at the goals, right? And so there are a lot of things that we want to understand, to help us understand and make sense of our contemporary world so we can take the right decisions in the face of overwhelming outreach, right? Okay, so we have, if you look on the screen, we said Israel has numerical advantage. How do we know? Verse 9. The author, in fact, the king himself said it. This king, he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than us. Powerful, right? And don't forget, he was talking to his people, so he had no reason to lie. True or false?
It is what it is, yep.
Right? So he was admitting. So let's look at the two things he characterized Israel with. They were more in number and they were mightier in strength than the Egyptians.
So, which means the Egyptians outnumbered the
No,
Israelites.
the Israelites outnumbered the Egyptians.
Wow.
So Israel had no numerical advantage as well as strength advantage. And the question therefore becomes, how come the group with both numerical and might advantage ended up being enslaved by the people with numerical and might disadvantage? And then you understand Africa and the rest of the world. You're getting the picture clear now?
But in our situation, it is that the people with, well, America is still majority white anyway, so
but we are coming. That and when we say we are trying to understand how these facts, right, play out, right? We are looking at one scenario. It may not be all the facts that will play out exactly the way they did in one as they would in another.
I'm sure
but there are parallels.
I'm sure Trump is reading the scripture, so he's just trying to make sure that we don't get to that number to make them minority.
But possibly, right? So again, we have a scenario, right, where a group has certain advantages, but those advantages don't help the group to gain ascendancy.
So here they are
just like Africa, we have the advantage in terms of natural resource, but the natural resources don't give us the sort of ascendancy we need. Fact of life, right? Okay. The next thing, point five. Point five.
More of a mindset too.
Say that again.
I'm saying it could also be a matter of mindset, because if Israel were that many, if it wasn't for the fact that they were slaves, that slavery mentality was also affecting them, because if you have more than the people...
No, because by this time they were not slaves. As of the days, they were not slaves. Right? Yeah. Look at the context, the chronology. They were not slaves at this time. They are just about to be made slaves.
Which means, I guess, most of their people were not in political positions for them.
So that means this should be our lesson. Those of us who have migrated from elsewhere, we just can't be here and say that we are interested in is the mighty green.
The green pastures. Yeah.
That's why this is important, right? This is important, right? So I said number 5 on the screen, right? There was societal stratification. How? We see that the king addressed his people, and then he referenced another people, right? So it was as if at this point in Egypt's and Israel's life, in the space called Egypt, the Egyptians, right, saw themselves as distinct from the Israelites, right? And maybe the Israelites never made it a point to really integrate into the system. And for one reason or another, they may be deliberate, we don't know. But let's learn lessons from that, right? And then we will get to know in verse 10 now, we move to a very interesting place. In the point 6, we say, I said there were political and economic suspicion. How do we know? Come on, let's see verse 10. This is still the king talking. He says, come on, let us deal wisely with the children of Israel. This is the king. Oh. Let us deal wisely with them. So wisdom was what made it possible for the Egyptians with numerical and might disadvantage to become the top dog. And the group with numerical and might advantage became the underdog. Wisdom was the difference. He says, come on, let us deal wisely with them referring to the children of the people of Israel, lest they multiply, right? Meanwhile, the author has already given us in verse 7 that the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mightily, and the land was filled with them. So this king in verse 10 was rehashing a reality. Let us deal with them wisely.
They multiplied in number, but they do not actually have any power or authority to do nothing.
Well, maybe they had economic power. They had, and the reason the author has given us, right? And let's read verse 10 carefully and see what really was happening and why this king assumed this position. He said, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. 1, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, you realize he didn't use the word if, it's when. It's when, so it was a matter of time, right? When there falleth out any war, they, that's the children of Israel, will join unto the enemies of Israel, of Egypt, and then fight against Egypt. And then they will get themselves, that means the Israelites will attempt to migrate from Egypt. That's complication. Can anybody try to untangle the complication?
Well, I think the simplicity is that these Egyptians were depending on the numbers of these Israelites for their economic strength or whatever. So they binding with other nations to fight them was going to deplete them of the forces they use, the human resources they needed for their work. So even apart from the fact that they were going to be destroyed or outnumbered, their economy too was going to suffer. And I think that is a little bit the reverse here. This man is trying to get people out of this country by immigration or shrink the government, federal government, by kicking people away. So with Israel's case, the Egyptians were scared that the time was going to come. They had 2 problems. 1, they were scared of being attacked or being outnumbered. And 2, they used these Israelites as their human resource to do job for them for economical power. So they stood at the point of loss or something, I should say.
Okay. Cynthia, do you have a counter opinion?
No.
Very, very, very interesting complication, though, right? It appears, despite the suspicion, everything points to the fact that the Egyptians, right, including the king, didn't like the fact that the economic power or the prosperity of Egypt was in their hands. of non-native Egyptians. Are you not getting the picture? Right? So what did he really want? He wanted native Egyptians to control the economy. Isn't it the same thing we are experiencing here? Right? Now, so let's go to the look on the screen. I put the issue / problem. I put it there. Cynthia, read the first point for me. We can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, read the what is on the screen, the first point 1.
The places or regions.
The issue / problem. Read the first.
Oh, the issue. Egypt has political power, but Israel has economic and demographic power.
Yeah. Right? Charles, would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Okay, Charles, read the second point for us.
Israel has apparent aspiration of independent nationhood. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah. And that's why do we say so? Right? The king himself said that in verse 10, the last point he made. Right? He said, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when they fall out at any war, they will also join our enemies and fight against us, so that they will migrate out of the land. Are you getting the picture clear? So
let me ask you this. Who are the Egyptians referring as their enemies at that time?
Okay. I will
Because
give you.
if we
Go
should
ahead.
identify the enemies, then that would be an ally for the Israelites, right?
That's the speculation, right? That's the speculation. But don't forget, the king here was making an argument, right? He was advancing an argument to his people why they must support what he was about to do. Are you getting the picture clear? So the whole of this thing was an argument, right? So if you know the form of an argument, you look at your premises and then you look at the conclusion. So you go back, because the next week and the weeks ahead, that's now we'll actually look at the literal appreciation of this text. This is what he said. His premise number 1: the people of the children of Israel are more than us. Premise number 2: the people of Israel are mightier than us. Conclusion: let us deal with them wisely. Are you not getting the right? And the wisdom, he actually explained it with further arguments, right? That, hey, another premise. If we don't do something about the situation, these people who have the knack for multiplication, they are going to multiply. Already, they are more than us currently. If they multiply, they will be more than us. You understand? Okay. If you people are not convinced about they multiplying, the next thing is war is imminent. It is inevitable. War will fall out. That's why you use the when and not if. War will fall out. Now, the prospect of these Israelites in whose hands Egypt's prosperity lies, when war breaks out, they are going to join our enemies, and with their increased strength, they will fight us. And the reason they will join our enemies and fight us is because they want to get out of this land. And we cannot allow it because our prosperity depends on them. So the problem for the Egyptian king was, how do I get the prosperity of Israel and at the same time limit or literally neutralize their ability to become a political threat?
So what was the reason why Israel wanted to obtain their independent nationhood? Was it because they were being maltreated?
We
or they
don't
just
know,
wanted,
but the king has
just
said
wanted
it.
to leave?
Yeah, possibly. Because if the king could talk to his people and then separate his people from the Israelites, you could see some sort of discrimination. You could see some sort of discrimination as part of the official policy or the unwritten policy of the place, that there was discrimination. Is that making sense? Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a valid argument? Dr. Boyson, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here, yeah.
I'm saying, is that a valid argument? Because from this, we could deduce, right? We could infer that there was some sort of discrimination.
Oh, yeah, big time, yeah. Big time.
And now come to America. What is the number one thing here? Isn't it discrimination?
Yeah. Discrimination.
Yeah. So again,
after 200 and something years of independence, still.
We
and even in the days of Egypt and Israel, at least, there wasn't too much of color disparity, but just because of ethnicity, they still suffered. But here you can see the black and white very evident.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So if this was a high-level meeting, why the non-representation by a segment of the population? Right? Yeah. These are tough questions. And if we are able to answer them, we will be better placed to recognize certain trends in our contemporary times and be able to strategize to make sure we are not adversely affected, at least on our way.
Posterity is going to deal with this generation. And there arose a man who was very, very racist to people in this country. And it was not about in history. Whereas most Democrats and people have come to try to unite the country by being colorblind, this guy is very, very colorblind.
Yeah. I mean, the truth of the matter is, as historians, we say we learn from history, that we don't learn from history. That's the bottom line, right? And that's the bottom line. So you get the picture, and it is not pretty, right?
Coming after the 4 years is over.
I think this would be a good place to stop and end today's discussion. But you obviously there are more, right? But as I said, we are using this to understand our contemporary America, at least, right? And then in general, understand the world, right? And when we learn how things played out, right, we will be better equipped with the facts, and then we'll be able to make the right decisions, right? So we are not taken unawares. Any question? Cynthia, you have any question?
None for me yet.
Okay.
I think it's a good lesson for what is happening in our contemporary situation. It's more biblical too, so we can't be faulted for such a discussion. I mean, it's practical. I mean, we didn't write the Bible. The Bible has said it. So all the Catholics, let them wear it.
Yeah, so we'll have material for Thursday, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Unless the White House calls into our program and DEI us.